I was recently asked by a student in my course, how do you deal with family and all the questions that are asked, like once you decide to become an entrepreneur? Questions like, hey, are you ever gonna go get a real job? When are you gonna quit? When are you gonna stop doing this and go back and actually start working again? And these are questions, it's funny because I dealt with these questions a lot. In fact, I remember probably 3-4 years into starting my first company, my grandma would be like, oh, when are you gonna get a job again? And she just couldn't understand that what I was doing was actually, in my opinion, much better than getting a job, that I was making money. My first company that I started was actually a dance clothing company, and I co-owned it with my mom. We were 50-50 partners. I built out the website, I did all the marketing, I did a lot of the heavy lifting. My mom also did a lot of the heavy lifting, but she was more on the manufacturing side, actually making the product. So I was selling the product, she was making the product. And what ended up, it was funny because my grandma would often say, oh, that's so nice of you to help out your mom with her company. Even though we were partners. I put a lot of work into making that business really as popular and as successful as it was. And so the question that Rosie, and hi Rosie, because she's probably watching this video right now, the question that Rosie asked was, how do you deal with all those questions? And for me personally, a lot of it was just kind of like laughing. And it's like, I don't want to, it's like, it's like when you talk to a kid and they're like, oh, well, Santa Claus is going to buy X, Y, and Z for me. It's realizing that these people are living in a different world. And it's not that they're wrong per se. And, maybe that's not a fair example to compare them to kids talking about Santa Claus, because obviously Santa Claus isn't real. But they're living in a different reality. And they don't know the things that you know and I know. They don't realize, so when I quit my job, at the time I was making $80,000 a year. Now I'm making a lot more than that. And that's not possible in the corporate world. And that's how I had to explain it to my parents and say, look, the upside of quitting my job, well, I mean, there's a lot of upsides other than just money, but the upside of quitting my job is I can do whatever I want with my time. I can make 100 times more money than I ever could at the corporate world. And it's just, and there's gonna be things that our grandkids and our great grandkids, the way that they experience reality is gonna be so different from what we can possibly comprehend. And so the way I'd interact with a lot of those questions is just kind of like, it actually fueled me. And I think I switched it around and I said, oh, I'm gonna show you one day. I'm gonna show you one day, there's gonna come a time where I'm just like so over the top, and it's now, where I'm so over the top successful that I can look back and be like, told you so. And to be honest, whether it's healthy or not, a big thing that fuels me is proving people wrong. I love when someone says, you can't do something. And I say to them, oh my God, yes, I can. Because I believe that I can do anything I put my mind to. And I think it's a challenge. And you got to decide, do you want to rise to the challenge or do you want to fall for their challenge? And another person I was talking to, he said he's made over 500 videos on YouTube and that he's still not having success with it. So here's the thing. If you're not having success with something you're doing, maybe it's time to start paying experts. It's time to figure out why the thing that you're doing isn't working out. And because if you keep doing, what is it, the quote Einstein says that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So persistence is 100% key. The reason, it's only the last few years that I've really felt quote unquote successful. The first 5 years of my entrepreneurial journey, I didn't consider myself successful at all. And the thing that nobody tells you about entrepreneurship is that it's exponential. And I've talked a little bit about this before, but my first year after quitting my corporate job, I don't even know if I made this much, but let's say I made $5,000 in that entire year. Then the next year was $10,000. Next year was $20,000. Next year was $40,000. And to be working 4 years and I've only made making less than 4 years than I made in a typical year at my corporate job, it's kind of embarrassing, right? Well, not when you realize that for me personally, it kept doubling. And you can't double your salary every year for 8 years in the corporate world. You can do that in entrepreneurship. Next year was $80,000, $160,000, and just, it's been pretty much more or less doubling every year. And the reason I bring this up is this is something not a lot of people understand about entrepreneurship is it's like, how do I explain this? if you think about it almost from a physics principle standpoint, if you had a box here, and it takes a lot of energy to get that box moving, right? But if you kept applying the same amount of force, if you look at the way physics works, if you kept applying the same amount of force, it would actually increase in speed over time. And the one reason this sometimes doesn't happen is because of friction and stuff. But the thing is, in entrepreneurship, not only are you applying force, you're learning how to apply force better, and at the same time, you're learning how to remove friction. So what happens is eventually you're just freaking flying. Like you're making way more money. And another thing that I heard recently that I didn't fully understand until just now is this idea, or I think I heard it in the past, but I didn't understand, it didn't really register until recently, is this idea that at some point in your entrepreneurial career, so much money starts appearing, and I don't want this to sound like hippy dippy or whatever, but I've experienced it. At some point, it's like so much money, you start making so much money that you're like, holy cow, where were you hiding all this time, money? And like, because you get better and better at recognizing opportunities. You get better at knowing yourself and knowing how you best can optimize opportunities. And you start getting different income sources. There's a quote that the average millionaire has seven different sources of income. I've got somewhere around that many. I've got YouTube ads. I've got affiliate marketing. I've got obviously I've got multiple different Amazon FBA businesses. That's multiple different income streams. I've also got my Shopify site. I've got my course. I've got all this different stuff and all these different things of income. And I've gotten really good at recognizing opportunity. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I've gotten really good at recognizing opportunity and learning how to work with myself and learning how to put the least amount of effort in for the most rewards. So to go back to the initial question, how do you deal with all that stuff? Let it fuel you. Let it be the fuel to your fire and to your inner self. And I'm not saying I was always perfect at this. It definitely bothered me at times, but laugh a little bit to yourself and just be like, you have no idea. It's like in the same way when a kid tries to tell you, the meaning of life or something, it's just like, you just don't have any experience. It's like, that's so cute. Don't patronize them. Don't be mean to them. But in your head, look at that and say, look, I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to use this as fuel and I'm going to overcome this. For me, for instance, even as supportive as my family was, but my dad definitely was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, why would you quit your corporate job? And to me, that was like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you one day. I believe in myself and I'm not saying he didn't believe in me or whatever, but there was, the way that parents do, there's a little bit of like, oh, well, I know better. And I'm like, no, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to figure this thing out because I believed that I could do it because I saw other people doing it. And to my father's credit, he didn't have the same level of experience. He didn't see as many success stories as I've seen. He thought probably it was kind of a fool's errand, where I'm looking and I see all these people that I'm like, look, I'm harder working than that person. I'm smarter than that person. If they can do it, why can't I do it? And you need to realize that you can do it. You can figure it out. It might take time. That's one of the biggest myths. A lot of people, if I would have quit 3 years into my entrepreneurial journey, people would have looked at me and been like, wow, what a failure. He had to go back and get a job. He wasn't making enough money, but I kept going. And now people look at me and be like, oh, yeah, that's really smart. Like that was the right decision to quit your job. And it's like, you wouldn't have said that if you would have talked to me a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years into my entrepreneurial journey. So that's one of the biggest principles is it's that persistence. But at the same time, persistence alone is just half the equation. The other thing is being able to take a step back and look at what's working, what's not working. Look and maybe hire someone to help you and say, hey, here's an issue I see. Now, that being said, don't be afraid to try things. It's all about throwing as much spaghetti on the wall as you can and then learning, why did that spaghetti stick to the wall and why did this other one not? And just continue doing that over and over again, repeating the process. So guys, make sure to hit that subscribe button and I'll see you in next week's video.